It was an ordinary evening in the quiet town of Tzfat, Israel. Rabbi Ezra ben Yachanan, a man known for his profound wisdom and deep connection to the divine, found himself in the middle of an extraordinary experience, a near-death encounter that would shake his very soul and change the course of his life forever. As he lay in his bed, gravely ill, a mysterious calm descended upon him. The illness had taken its toll, and his body was on the brink of collapse. But in the stillness of his suffering, Rabbi Ezra felt something unexplainable, a pull, an invitation, something beyond the world of the living. His heart slowed, his breathing shallow, and suddenly, he was no longer in the physical world. He was somewhere else. He had crossed over. It wasn't the dark abyss he had always heard about in religious teachings. It was bright, almost blindingly so, and yet felt peaceful, too peaceful to be true. Rabbi Ezra stood at the threshold of a realm beyond human understanding. And in that place, a powerful presence awaited him. It wasn't the familiar face of his ancestors, nor the spirits of the righteous ones who had passed before him. No, this presence was something far more monumental. The figure spoke to him without words, and yet, every thought, every question Rabbi Ezra had was answered instantly. This presence, this being, revealed a secret that would alter everything he thought he knew about the Messiah. It was a revelation so mind-blowing, so radically different from what his entire life had been dedicated to understanding, that the rabbi could hardly comprehend it. As he stood before this ethereal presence, the world around him seemed to dissolve into a single, unbroken moment of truth. What he learned in that instant would challenge centuries of tradition, upend expectations, and leave Rabbi Ezra grappling with a new mission in life, a mission to share the revelation he had just received with the world. The rabbi's heart raced. Even though he no longer felt the constraints of his mortal body, the air around him was thick with the weight of divine presence, and every breath he took was saturated with profound understanding. But the figure before him, vibrating with an almost unbearable intensity, spoke, not in words, but in direct revelation. Rabbi Ezra, though awestruck, could not help but question what he was experiencing. Was this truly the Messiah? And if so, what was he trying to reveal to him? The figure's presence radiated an energy that felt both infinitely old and eternally new. In the blink of an eye, the rabbi's mind opened to an understanding he had never before grasped. He saw in vivid detail the intricate tapestry of creation, how each thread of human history had been woven with a purpose he had yet to understand. The Messiah, the figure before him, was not just a person. He was the embodiment of a divine plan, far grander and more complex than Rabbi Ezra had ever imagined. The Messiah spoke to him, but this time, words formed in his mind, clear and direct. Rabbi Ezra, you have walked in the light of your faith, guided by tradition and wisdom, but now, it is time for you to see beyond what you have known. The Messiah is not merely a king, a conqueror, or a prophet. He is the fulfillment of a cosmic truth that transcends time, space, and human understanding. The words vibrated through Rabbi Ezra's very soul, piercing the veil of doubt that had clouded his mind. He had spent his life studying the ancient texts, deciphering the teachings of his ancestors, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Messiah, it seemed, was not bound by the limitations of human expectations. He was not a figure confined to the past or to the future. He was a living, breathing revelation, a manifestation of divine love, an eternal being whose purpose was not to lead a single nation or people, but to awaken humanity to a truth that had always existed, waiting to be discovered. You see, Rabbi, the figure continued, the Messiah is not a man who will come to redeem a single group of people. He is the Redeemer of all creation. Every heart, every soul, every being in existence has a part in this revelation. The Messiah comes not to conquer with force, but to awaken the hearts of men to the truth that they are all part of a divine purpose. Rabbi Ezra felt the weight of this truth pressing upon him. It was too much to fully comprehend, yet it made perfect sense. His entire life had been dedicated to the belief that the Messiah would come to Israel, to the Jewish people, to restore them to their rightful place among the nations. But this new understanding, this new revelation shattered that notion. The Messiah was not a political figure, nor a national leader. He was a spiritual force that transcended all borders, all divisions, all human limitations. The figure's presence grew even more intense, and with it, Rabbi Ezra's understanding expanded. He began to see flashes of scenes, visions of people from every corner of the world, every race, every background. They were all drawn to the same light, the same truth. And in that moment, Rabbi Ezra realized that the Messiah's mission was not to save one group of people, but to awaken all of humanity to their divine connection. The world is not as it seems. The Messiah's voice echoed in his mind. The divisions between nations, races, and religions are human constructs. They are not the truth. The truth is unity. The truth is love. The truth is the realization that all people, all beings, are part of a single divine plan. Rabbi Ezra's thoughts swirled in a torrent of emotion. The implications of what he was being shown were staggering. The Messiah was not just a figure of the past. He was a living, breathing presence who existed beyond time. He was with humanity now, in every moment, in every heartbeat, guiding those who were willing to listen to his voice. The visions continued, scenes of people in pain, in sorrow, in fear, all reaching out for something more, something higher. Rabbi Ezra saw the faces of those who had suffered for centuries, those who had been marginalized, oppressed, forgotten. He saw the faces of those who had never heard the name of the Messiah, but who, deep in their hearts, longed for the truth. And he saw that the Messiah was already there, in their hearts, in their struggles, waiting for them to recognize his presence. Suddenly, the figure before him began to fade, its light dimming, but the message it left was clear. Rabbi Ezra had been given a revelation beyond anything he could have imagined. His mission was no longer just to teach the old ways, to preserve the traditions of his ancestors. It was to awaken the world to the truth of the Messiah, to share the revelation that had been given to him in that moment. He returned to his body with a start, his breath quickening, his heart pounding. His mind raced with the new knowledge, the new understanding that had been imparted to him. It was not just a personal revelation, it was a message for the world. The rabbi knew that he had been chosen for something greater, something more profound than he could have ever dreamed. He had to share this message, to spread the truth of the Messiah's universal love, his eternal presence, and his call to humanity to recognize their divine connection. Rabbi Ezra had come face to face with the truth of the Messiah, and now, it was his mission to awaken others to that same truth. But the journey ahead would not be easy. The world was not ready for such a radical revelation. But Rabbi Ezra knew that the time had come, and he was determined to fulfill the task that had been set before him. With a heart full of both fear and courage, he stepped into the world once more, knowing that his life had changed forever. The first few days after Rabbi Ezra returned to his body were a blur of confusion and awe. His mind raced, processing the revelation he had experienced in that divine realm. The truth, now lodged deep within him, burned like a fire in his chest. But the world around him was still the same, still bound by the same old routines. He knew what he had to do. He had to tell people, he had to share this incredible truth. But how could he? How could he explain something so vast, so beyond the scope of human understanding, to people who were so firmly rooted in their own traditions? How could he convey the message that the Messiah was not a single figure for a single people, but a universal, eternal presence, the very foundations of every? In his mind, Rabbi Ezra could still hear the words of the Messiah, reverberating in the deepest corners of his soul. The truth is unity. The truth is love. The truth is the realization that all people, all beings, are part of a single divine plan. But how could he make others understand this? How could he convince the people of Tzfat, the people of Israel, that the Messiah was not a political leader or a national savior, but the divine spark that connected all of humanity. He began with small gatherings, inviting his closest disciples and fellow rabbis to his home. He spoke to them gently. First, testing the waters, he shared his experience, describing the light, the presence, the words that had been spoken to him. But as he spoke, he saw the disbelief in their eyes. Some were skeptical, others were uncomfortable. The idea of the Messiah being a universal presence, rather than a figure to restore Israel's kingdom, was too radical, too foreign. One of his oldest friends, Rabbi Yitzhak, looked at him with concern. "Ezra, I have known you for many years," he said slowly, "but what you speak of, it challenges everything we have been taught. The Messiah is meant to be our Redeemer, to restore the kingdom of Israel. You speak of something else, something beyond our understanding." Rabbi Ezra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I understand, Yitzhak. I understand your confusion, but what I have seen, what I have felt, is not just a personal vision. It is a message for all of us. The Messiah is not confined to our expectations. He is the light that can heal all wounds, that can unite us all, regardless of our race, our nation, our creed." Rabbi Yitzhak's face hardened. "And if the people do not accept this? What if they refuse to believe this new vision of the Messiah? What then?" Rabbi Ezra's heart clenched. He knew the answer, but he could not bring himself to speak it. If the world rejected this truth, if they continued to cling to their divisions and their old beliefs, then the path ahead would be difficult, perhaps even dangerous. But he knew he had no choice. He had been shown the truth, and now he had to share it, regardless of the consequences. Days turned into weeks, and Rabbi Ezra's message began to spread, though not without resistance. Some believed, others were skeptical, and many outright rejected the idea of a universal Messiah. The rabbis of Israel, especially those who held the traditional views, dismissed his claims as heresy. To them, the idea of a Messiah who transcended national borders was a direct threat to their centuries-old understanding of salvation. But for every person who dismissed him, there were others who listened. There were those who had long been disillusioned with the divisions that plagued the world, those who had seen the suffering caused by centuries of conflict, hatred, and war. Rabbi Ezra began to connect with people in unexpected ways. A Christian traveler, passing through Tzfat, was drawn to him after hearing his words. A Muslim scholar, visiting Israel to study the ancient texts, came to him with questions. Even people from outside the Abrahamic faiths, curious about his message, approached him for answers. As word spread, Rabbi Ezra realized that this was no ordinary task. It was a calling, a divine mission that would require him to step beyond the borders of his own faith, to embrace people from all walks of life. But the journey was not without its peril. There were those who saw him as a threat, as a heretic who was undermining centuries of tradition. Some even tried to silence him, resorting to threats and intimidation. One night, as Rabbi Ezra walked through the narrow streets of Tzfat, deep in thought about the challenges ahead, he was confronted by a group of men. Their faces were hidden in the shadows, their eyes full of anger. "You speak of unity," one of them spat, "but your words will destroy everything we have worked for. You dare challenge the very teachings that have kept us together for generations." Rabbi Ezra stood tall. Despite the fear rising within him, he had faced many dangers in his life, but this felt different. These men were not just challenging him, they were challenging the very truth he had been given. "I do not speak to destroy," Rabbi Ezra said calmly. "I speak to unite. I speak to heal. The Messiah is not a force of division. He is the force of love, the force that binds all people together. If you cannot see that, then I fear for your hearts." The men stepped forward, but before they could act, a figure appeared from the darkness, Rabbi Yitzhak, his old friend, who had come to warn him. "You do not understand," Rabbi Yitzhak said, stepping between the rabbi and the angry mob. Ezra is not the enemy. He is the bearer of truth. If you cannot accept it now, perhaps in time, you will understand. The crowd hesitated, but in the end, the confrontation ended without violence. Rabbi Ezra knew that this was just the beginning, that many would oppose him. Many would ridicule him, and some would try to destroy him, but he also knew that he could not turn back. The truth had been revealed to him, and it was his duty to share it, no matter the cost. And so, Rabbi Ezra's journey continued, a journey of awakening, of spreading the truth of the Messiah's universal love to all who would listen. Along the way, he would face many trials, many obstacles, and many heart-wrenching moments of doubt. But he knew that the truth he carried was stronger than any opposition he would face. And as long as he breathed, he would continue to share that truth with the world until the day the world would finally recognize the Messiah, not as a savior of one people, but as the savior of all.